Hello, welcome to LoFi Bedtime Very Tales. In this episode, I present to you the tale about Kenny Knuckles Knox. The story is about using your brain to solve problems instead of using anger and violence. I can confidently state that you will enjoy the story, and the song will eventually make its way to an episode. Perhaps you can listen to the story while taking a road trip or lounging in the shade by the pool. I hope you enjoy it, and that you do things today to make tomorrow better. Legend of Kenny Knuckles Knox. Kenneth Gustav Knox was now 12 years old, and he has predominantly preferred it that his drinks that are not intended to be hot are not too cold. Too cold makes the flavor disappear, like when a school holiday is halfway through and then it's suddenly over. Almost everyone called him Kenny, except for his granny, as the only Kenny she knew was his grandpa, her husband. So she called Kenny Gus, which was her father's name. It was a real conversation whether to name him Gustav Kenneth, but Kenny's mother had the final decision since she was ultimately responsible for bringing him into the world. Kenny is what we'll call him in this here story, and I am more than confident that he is cool with that. We will eventually get to the part of the story where you shall learn how he gets the nickname Knuckles. Kenny was in the 6th grade at Pine Bluff Elementary, where he excelled in literature arts and recess and a blacktop game called Kickback Attack. But we shall get to that when it is time for us to get to that, my patient listener. Kenny was bigger than most in his class. Taylor is the biggest, and she thinks she is the best. But this is not her story, so I will stop there. If you want more information about her, perhaps I shall compose a sonnet or novella or something. Perhaps I shall not. Any whatever. Kenny had what his sisters called a soft face. He did not have chubby cheeks or a forehead like a car's hood or anything, and his nose hadn't decided to start sprouting yet. He's going to have a nose of character, as some people say, by the time he is 30, and he'll be cool with that too. His favorite color is orange, and white is next, yellow is third. You'd think that purple would be his favorite, as that is clearly the most wonderful and celebrated color of all time. At least that's what my mind tells me to communicate. He was a bit mature for his age, since his mother had always spoken to him in such a way that he needed to look up things she said in the dictionary in order to truly know what she was trying to convey to him, which in the If It Matters department, he relished doing. He was a learner, and you should be too. We learn forever, whether we think we do or not. Kenny has an older sister, Lacey, 6,276 days, or 17 years old, and a younger sister, Jasmine, Jazz. She is 6.73 years old. We're not going to do a day count on her. He loved his sisters and enjoyed being a younger brother who learned from Lacey and an older brother who helped teach Jazz things and ensured she didn't do the simple screw-ups that he did when he was her age. Lacey is creative and will have success as an artist of many mediums. Not bagpipes, though. Don't ask me why. I think she'd be awesome at bagpipes. Jazz will become a brainiac whose intelligence will vex billions. Yes, billions. They live with their father and maternal granny. And what will always be the saddest thing to ever happen to him was his mother passing from a terminal illness 2 years ago. Aside from the overwhelming grief that Kenny and his family experienced, is that he learned to appreciate every moment he had with the people that he cared about and who cared about him. Kenny spent many an afternoon with his school counselor processing his emotions, and the lunch monitor, Mrs. Benjamin, would comfort and console him on days when he went off with his food alone in the cafeteria. He also participated in a school grief group that helped him work through his sadness. His school district had these groups across all of its schools, so Lacey was in her own group too. Jazz was able to get through this with Granny's help. Granny's name is Vera, but we shall call her Granny for the purposes of the story, as that is what she told everyone to call her. Well, except for Pop. Pop called her Vera. On an aside, Kenny would never wear slides, with or without socks. He thought it was corny, a phrase his granny used, especially black socks with white slides. His granny always used many funny phrases or adjectives, which is where his mother's delight in vocabulary sprouted and flourished. His granny would pepper sentences with words such as putrid, noxious, odious, and lionized. They were not always words about smelly things. She also gave him the phrase, kick rocks. He loved the way it sounded when his granny said it, for she paused on the K's when declaring it. Therefore, moreover, and furthermore, Kenny used it all the time. When he said it calmly, he meant it in a way for people just to back off and leave him alone. Kenny enjoyed playing chess with his granny. He's not great, but he's trying. She does not let him win ever. And that is a groovy thing, as one should never be able to win something they did not earn. Kenny also participated in cross-country like his mom had. Mom was reported to have had a gloriously graceful gait, and she could gallop for miles and meters, and no one was able to catch her. She was always smiling when she was running. Smiling like she knew something wonderful was going to happen, and she was running to see it happen. Granny had told Kenny one time that his mother was always running towards something and never from anything. His mother would work out solutions as to what was bothering her in her mind during her runs. She broke state records in high school 3 times and was hoping to try out for the Olympics. But life sometimes has people take different paths. Kenny could already run 6 miles, and he thought he could do anything that he did not think he could do after 2 miles into his runs. He realized that being active helped him overcome nervousness or fears and anger when he did not believe in himself as much as he should have. you do the same. Believe in you. I do. And I don't likely know you. Pop, Albert, or Al, if you prefer the casual, and he certainly did, but we're going to refer to him as Pop. Pop was a supportive and considerate father who had no brothers or sisters and was doing the best that he could being a papa. He worked for a technology company installing fiber optic cables and telephone services in the area. Due to the nature of his work, his hands were stronger than a plumber's wrench. He could squeeze an apple to mush. However, he was not a tough guy showing that off or anything, though. Pop thought fighting was for dummies and people who had run out of ways to be reasonable. When Pop was a boy, he used to do Golden Gloves, which is a boxing club for kids. He did Golden Gloves to get out of his overcrowded home and to have a safe place to go, due to the rough and gang-filled streets he grew up on. His family's small apartment had many extended family members in it, and none were kids. So it was not fun for Pop to hang out at home. And 3 of the 5 other people who lived there smoked cigarettes, which made it feel like he was living in a fireplace. Pop forbade Kenny from participating in Golden Gloves or any martial arts, as he would likely be challenged by others to fight in the way that Pop had been. Pop had to knock down more than one antagonistic aggressor who thought it was funny to try and provoke and tease him. Pop only defended himself and did not like having to use his fists to stop someone or several people from attacking him as an adolescent. Pop told Kenny that he used his cunning and cleverness to avoid certain people and places to avoid possible or likely physical confrontations. He hung up the boxing gloves many years ago and was very comfortable with who he was without having that be part of his identity. And then there was the mascot of the home, which is the family dog, Gas Money. He was named this due to all the car trips to the veterinarian he took as a sickly puppy. Gas Money was a gift from Granny to help the family heal from the passing of Mom. He has been very helpful too, as there are no crumbs anywhere in the house, ever. He is a Bull Mastiff Husky mix. Some people call that breed a Bullski. He has Arctic blue eyes and his coloring is silver and black. He looks really majestic. Mondo is an adjective to describe his size and his appetite. But he's just a slobbering softy who craves to get out of the house and yard as much as possible. Gas Money and Kenny go for walks or strolls, if that's a word you like, around the neighborhood. All the squirrels delight in tormenting Gas Money. They see him ambling up the sidewalk and begin chirping at him. Sometimes acorn shells rain from the limbs above onto his head. Kenny tells the squirrels to kick rocks. The squirrels should try to be friends with Gas Money because really terrific photogenic opportunities would likely develop. I meant to make that pun. Gas Money loved to sing. If you can call it that, as it sounded more like a large balloon having all the air let out of it in a painful manner. He typically sang in the kitchen when Pop was making breakfast. Pop always gives him a hard-boiled egg for his performance. Gas Money tended to stare off into space at times, imagining what it would be like to be in a bistro in Paris or Montreal, where he is a 5-star Michelin chef. He imagined himself wearing the chef hat and ordering others to saute sizzling shallots, or they could kick rocks. Since Gas Money cannot speak or write or use a keyboard to communicate, only he, me, and you know this. It's a splendid secret that you can tell people, and I won't call you a dry snitcher if you do. Kenny's primo pals were Mason and Max. Both had older sisters too, and they complained about not being able to get into the bathroom like they'd like to or urgently needed to sometimes. Max listened to Kenny better than Mason. Mason was more fun to get adventurous with, though, like climbing trees and other mildly perilous possibilities. They did the limestone caves twice. The second time was more than enough, as the bats were around then, and that was spooky for both of them. Max thought fighting was dumb too. Mason did not think being a tough guy is a good idea or anything either. Mason had a tendency to do the whole, if they'd have been me, I would have thing. It's interesting that Mason predicted that he would have done things like tell the principal that she doesn't know what ketchup is supposed to taste like, or he would have jumped onto the back of that fire truck to help rescue the kitty up the oak tree in the Johnsons' yard had he been there. Once Mason began with this conversation about a plane losing an engine with the pilot unconscious and how best to land it, and Jazz entered the room from the kitchen with an oatmeal raisin cookie in her left hand. Oh, they are so yummy. Anyway, she instructed Mason with, "Don't. Just don't." And then she walked out of the room that had become so quiet you could hear her chewing on the cookie, having a small belch, and then her muttering a polite, "Excuse me," to herself in the kitchen. Max whispered, "Brr." Kenny began with, "If I were in a situation where a 6-year-old girl embarrassed me in front of my friends, I would begin to question whether I should keep my thoughts to myself moving forward." Mason just started giggling because he knew he was being foolish. One thing to note is there have been many times where Max will implement his catchphrase when things are weird or unpredictable. Max will say, "The anticipation I am experiencing is wonderful." This happened once when the principal was drinking out of her water bottle and she turned her head before drinking and the water spilled down her back. The water must have been too cold for Kenny because she began to shiver in place and did not move. Max stated, "The anticipation I am experiencing is wonderful." They all laughed at him saying that and not at the principal. Mrs. Benjamin noticed them snickering and she grinned and playfully waved her finger at them. The principal was fine and no other water was wasted that day at the school. There was a drought in their area, so water was very important. I think that I can verily state that I am getting way off track here. Next thing you know, I'll be telling you about Mrs. Benjamin's flower garden. Oh, those begonias! Ah! Back to the story we go. There was a mildly aggressive side to Kenny, though. When he was in 2nd and 3rd grade, he played an activity that one could say was barbaric. This was a forbidden playground game called Kick, Back, Attack. He would engage in it until it became banned for good due to the injuries inflicted by the participating parties. The children would all line up and run at one another, kicking at each other, and the goal was whoever got through first to a designated line behind them won. People could kick someone from behind who got through and could attempt to kick them down. They only played one game a day so they would not get caught. It was always boys versus girls. And this is when I tell you not to do this. I repeat, do not try this, as nothing good will come out of this. Nothing good will come out of this. Kenny would always side with the girls. The boys never gave him a hard time for this, despite him being exceptionally talented at this due to his speed with his legs and feet. His shins would be bruised, so he would wear long pants whether it was hot weather or not. The girls' side always won, and this was typically due to Kenny taking on 3 boys at once. His mother noticed his violently violet shins one day and became upset. She asked him who was hurting him. Kenny reported on the game and that he was protecting the girls because his school had too many boys who were in Taekwondo and in elite soccer clubs. His mother reported that violence is not a solution to anything unless someone is defending themselves or someone who is in real danger. And then only the smallest amount of aggression is to be meted out towards the aggressor. She reminded him to use his brain as it is his biggest resource to get out of difficult situations. This sounded similar to what his father had instructed him to do. Kenny reported, "You sound like Pop." His mother replied, "This is a perspective your father and I have in common. We do not believe in violence. We believe in love." This warmed Kenny's heart as he did too. His mother then instructed him to stop, and he promised he would. Of course, he made true on his promise. His mother called the school and reported on this savage activity that was quickly and permanently abolished. There was an announcement that there were cameras monitoring the playground, and anyone misbehaving in any manner would be summoned to the principal's office for a discussion. Yikes. The school really took action on that. I wish they'd take action on the droopy sour broccoli they serve on Wednesdays, but that's a problem for me to solve. 2 years ago, Kenny had been picked on by Lacey's friends Devin and Dorian, or Dee Dee, if you will. Maybe you should, outside of his house. This happened shortly after his mother had passed. Kenny was drifting off in his mind to a memory of his mother teaching him how to tie his shoes. He recalled the orange shoelaces and how his mother called them tangerine tentacles that were fit to be tied. His mother was patient with him and forbade slip-on sneakers until he would be in junior high. They saw him weeping and told him he needed to be tough and not cry about anything ever. Lacey was inside journaling her feelings and overheard them doing this. She came outside and told them to kick rocks. She loved the phrase too. Dorian challenged her with a whatever and asserted that Kenny needed to man up. Lacey asked if his mother was still alive, and he said, "Yep, you've met her, Lacey." Lacey scoffed and stated, "Yeah, that's right. I forgot, as I don't remember unremarkable people. Did your mom win state at anything ever?" Dorian was silent. Lacey reported that Kenny is already more of a man than Dorian is for dealing with his loss. Silence presented, as did Granny at the door. By the look in her eye, D&D did not want Granny to become part of this contentious conversation. Granny declared, "Kick rocks!" And off they went. Those two walked off with their metaphorical tails between their literal legs, and they stopped coming by. In the good news department, a certain furry friend would make his introduction into the family in a few days. Now, you probably want to know how Kenny got the nickname Knuckles now, don't you? Well, he got the nickname before the spring break that year. Kenny had torn up his knuckles when 3 8th graders were beating on Max, Mason, and Taylor. Remember the biggest person in their grade? Max, Mason, and Taylor were at Heidegger's Park, and they were trying to do a pull-up at the pull-up station. These 3 8th graders were walking by and decided to tease them. Since Taylor was large for her age, they began to say unkind and mean things to her. I will not report on what they said verbatim. They said if one of them could do a pull-up, they would leave them alone. Mason cheerfully volunteered, as he knew he could do at least 2. He leapt up and gripped the metal bar in his hands, and one of the bullies then took this opportunity to knock him down from behind. Another bully shoved Max to the ground and put him in a headlock. Meanwhile, and I do mean, the other bully jumped onto Taylor as she was larger than him. He began pulling at her hair and smacking her in the head. Kenny had been late to meeting them because Gas Money had been a silly boy with the squirrels on his after-school stroll. Kenny ran at them and kicked the one who had grabbed Taylor in the shins 3 times, causing him to scream in pain, and he let her go. He then challenged the other 2, and each came at him. He pushed them all harder than they thought he could. One fell onto his back and had the wind knocked out of him. Meanwhile, the other seized Kenny by his shirt as he was pushing him, and they fell into some gravel rocks. The bully twisted as he fell and bruised up his face. Kenny sliced up his knuckles in all the rocks. Kenny was the angriest he had ever been, and he felt like he was going to explode. It was as if he was thinking about Dorian and Devin that day. Kenny had a brief urge to punch the bully with both hands simultaneously and raised his frenzied fists in the air. Kenny just sat on top of this bully's chest and stared into his eyes. He resisted the urge and remained still. A pizza delivery person who had been taking a break in her car witnessed this eruption of violence and sprinted over. She broke it up by telling Kenny to get off of him. She asked Kenny and his crew if they were okay, and they affirmed that they were. She then admonished the bullies for picking on such smaller kids. She directed them to leave or she was going to call the police. They wandered off wounded to their cores. Kenny and the others profusely thanked her, and she encouraged them to get out of there and go home. As they all began to say, "Wow, what just happened?" and "I can't believe just what happened," Mason noticed Kenny's bleeding knuckles. They all thanked Kenny for his intervention and bravery. Kenny felt strong and weak at the same time. He knew he helped, but he almost let his anger take over. He told them not to tell anyone so that they didn't get into any trouble. They all promised they wouldn't. However, someone had captured the end of the melee on their phone or camera or internet device or whatever, and it went viral. What was shared made it look like Kenny was a dominant force of nature, not to be contended with by anyone. With his bleeding knuckles, the legend began. Younger kids would assert that he could take down high schoolers. Kenny always played it down and was sincerely humble. Kenny did not get into trouble for this, as his friends and the pizza delivery person verified the story. Granny contacted the pizza restaurant, Pizza Plaza. It specializes in a thin crust and has a specialty pizza named the Jalapeno Howl. So spicy it'll make you howl. I love it. Whatever. The delivery person, her name is Aisley, reported word for word what all transpired in that situation that took place in 30 seconds or less. Her description of what transpired, however, was more than 3 minutes. She would qualify things with like, and also end sentences with, you know what I mean? Pop and Granny thanked her and would always ask for Ainsley to deliver pizzas until she went off to art school in a coastal city. Sculpture was her designated medium. Around school in the public pool that summer, Kenny would overhear people say things like, "Best be careful, here come Knuckles," or "You don't want to mess with them Knuckles." Personally, I think the most appropriate nickname for Kenny should have been Kick Rock Knox. But what do I know? I'm just the person writing the story. Oh, and the 8th graders soon discovered what it was like to be made a mockery, as they were teenagers who had bullied children. In the future funny department, as the years went on, Mason would tell anyone who would listen that he had just finished his 7th pull-up when he was knocked down out of pure jealousy, since he could complete more pull-ups than an 8th grader. And only once did Mason begin to say what he would have done if he would have been Kenny. Once again, Jazz entered the room, this time with a lemon tart in her right hand. Delicious. She reminded Mason that he did not need to be Kenny because he was already there. Max guffawed and made a burning sound. They all giggled. It was cool. Over that summer, Kenny began jogging every other day, and more often than not, Gas Money would run with him. They were both always smiling too. They were quite the pair, and people would marvel at how well they ran together in unison and how well Gas Money listened to Kenny. As he ran, Kenny thought about things that he could change and things he could not. Other times, he would think about him breaking the finish line like his mother did, and how happy she would have been of him. Most of all, though, Kenny thought about his future and that it would all be cool. Little did Kenny know that he had attracted the attention of a rising 10th grader, Adrian. Adrian lived across town and went to a different high school than Lacey. Adrian's cousin had been one of the bullies in the park that day. Adrian thought he was some sort of tough guy who wanted to make his own viral video. Adrian would frequent the park where Kenny would typically run. Adrian was waiting for a day when Gas Money was not present to make a scene. Adrian knew that Gas Money was capable of macerating him to bits if he tried to hurt Kenny. Kenny had told Max and Mason to meet him at the water fountain near the skate park around 11 so they could goof off for the afternoon. Kenny preferred that water fountain as the water was not too cold. Adrian was there that day too, and he thought this would be his opportunity to humiliate Kenny. Imagine being 15 years old and having a 12-year-old bother you so much that you want to fight him. All I can say is, wow. As Kenny was sipping and slurping out of the fountain, Adrian and other miscreants from across town approached him in a surrounding manner. Several nincompoops were capturing this on their devices. Adrian enthusiastically announced that he is going to take Kenny to the House of Pain. Max and Mason walked up and began thinking, "Here we go again." Adrian transformed his hands to fists and raised them and started with,
"Come on, Knuckles. You're the tough guy, right? Come on."
Adrian then said something cruel about Kenny's mother. Kenny had urges to bloody his own knuckles on Adrian's face and to kick Adrian's shins into smithereens. And then Kenny could hear his mother's and father's voices reminding him about violence. He was not defending himself from mortal danger in this situation, and he was to use his mind instead. Kenny then knew he would not react with his body, but instead his brain. A few seconds before he spoke, Max dryly stated,
"The anticipation I am experiencing is wonderful."
Kenny heard this and chuckled, to which Max and Mason knew all was perfectly placid. Kenny decided to use some more mature language his mother helped him learn and began with, "So you think besting me would somehow prove that you are more important than me or anyone else? I'm soon to be a 7th grader that seems to have threatened you in a way that you are compelled to actually want to hit me. I thought high schoolers were smarter than that. I guess I was wrong. And I already know that my mom was smarter than your entire family by the way that you behave." Adrian called him bad words. They simply stood there looking at one another. Some of the delinquents who accompanied Adrian yelled vulgar things and instructed Adrian to
"Get him!"
Kenny, fully composing himself, apologized to Adrian for consuming all of his mind and wished him well in detention come fall. Everyone but Adrian laughed at that. Adrian gazed around at his not-so-supportive supporters and whined,
"Thanks for nothing, losers."
All those that came with Adrian started walking away. Adrian was now alone and appeared visibly anxious. Kenny instructed Adrian to kick rocks. As they walked away, Max and Mason said that they were very sorry about what Adrian said about Kenny's mom. Kenny said it was okay and that he just passed one of the hardest tests he'll ever have to take. They went off and got malts. Max got a banana, Mason a vanilla peach, and Kenny a huckleberry. He saved the taste for gas money. When he got home, Granny looked at him like she knew something had happened. As he was reading an adventure story written over 100 years ago on the sofa, Granny patted him on the head and reminded him that she was proud of him. Granny knew what had happened as Lacey had told her because it was all over the socials. When Pop came home, he knew too. He looked at Kenny's rapidly deteriorating running shoes in the mudroom and announced that everyone was getting new shoes before school started back up. So I guess you can guess who became the top cross-country runner in the area for years to come. He won state 4 times, broke records at almost every competition, went to the most prestigious university for cross-country runners, and made it to the Olympics. And guess what, Tiki Hut? He won silver in the Olympics too. 2 different times. Gold would have been groovy and bronze would have been bravo, but silver was spectacular to him. To be the second best in the world twice was more than enough for him. I'd be happier than a bee bathed in a petunia's pollen if I were to be named the 9th millionth best toothbrusher. So I simply cannot imagine being the second best at anything. Twice. Every time he was running, he imagined what he was running towards in his mind, and he was never running away from anything. He never forgot the words Granny had told him about his mother and what she had said. So, before ever acting out in anger with violence, please do not. Use your brain or mind and words instead of feet or fists or anything else. There's an old saying that goes something like, "Those who anger you control you." I'd like to say that that is true, and that is enough for me to say now. I wish you well. I wish you peace, my patient listener. Now, I'm going to go kick rocks. I wish the best for you.